Hello there, theater people. It is Melanie and Bruce here with Thespis in the Green Room. How are you, Bruce?
Hey, Melanie, I am well. How are you today?
I am very, very good. I'm excited
Yeah.
about today's conversation.
Oh, me too. Me too. It's all about this new play festival in South Carolina. It's
Yeah.
funny. I saw some like little glimpses of it on Facebook a few weeks ago, and here we're now talking to the guy who's starting the thing off for us.
Yes, we are talking to West Hyler today. He is
Hmm.
the executive and artistic director of the brand spanking new South Carolina New Play Festival. And
Yeah.
West was fantastic. I love talking to him. Let me tell you a little bit about his background. West Hyler was the producing artistic director for the New York Musical Festival. And that's a very big deal if you're
Yeah.
not familiar
What
with it.
he talks about that, and I
Amazing
think, oh my
festival.
gosh, yeah.
Mm.
I feel like I missed something by not ever experiencing it. Yeah.
Oh, it's very well known, and a lot of amazing artists as well as actual pieces came out of that festival and went on to
Hmm.
have incredible careers and lives. So he
Hmm.
talks a little bit about that in our conversation. So yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. He was also the co-artistic director for the Drama League nominated Artistic Stamp and the scene director and story writer for Cirque du Soleil's Paramour, which was Cirque's first Broadway musical. His resume does not stop there. He's directed shows all over the world from Europe to Las Vegas and everywhere in between. West also worked on Broadway as associate director on Jersey Boys
Oh, one of my
and
favorites.
associate director on How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And he also worked on Beautiful, the Carole King musical.
Another one of my favorites. These are
Yeah,
wonderful shows. Yeah.
incredible, incredible. He has been a Drama League Fall Directing Fellow as well as a Drama League Resident Artist and earned his MFA from University of California at San Diego. So that's West.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
In a nutshell. Yeah,
Yeah.
and super energetic. I mean, talking to him, you
Yes.
think you
Yes.
just get all this energy from him. It's really incredible.
Right. So this festival he's planned for Greenville is phenomenal. And I
Mm.
won't even try to explain it. I'll let him do that. So why don't we
Yeah,
get to
let's
it?
jump in. Sure.
Hello, West. Welcome to the Green Room.
Hi, thank you for having me. I am thrilled to be here.
We want to know, how did you get your start in theater?
I moved to Fort Lauderdale and went to a performing arts high school when I was 14 years old. So my mom and dad had divorced, and I was born in Kentucky. And in Kentucky, I really was struggling. I didn't have a lot of friends, and I hadn't found my thing. And, being a child of divorce can be tough. And I went to a summer camp and found this theater summer camp, and I just flourished there. So when my mom remarried and we moved to Fort Lauderdale, she enrolled me in a children's theater, and it was like my whole life had changed. Suddenly I
Mhm.
had all these friends, and I had a passion, and I had something that I really loved doing and that excited me in the mornings. And then when I went to this performing arts high school, I was cast as a lead in a lot of plays, and it sounds silly, but it was the equivalent of being the star quarterback because at a performing
Mhm.
arts high school,
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, I was dancing ballet, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was as far from a sports athlete as you can imagine.
Now,
Mm.
ballet is some tough stuff, though.
It was,
Come on now.
It is tough. Yeah, yeah.
it was. Funny, actually, my dance teacher from that high school sent me a whole bunch of videos recently that she had found in the archives
Oh,
of
wow.
the dances I did there.
That's fun.
So it changed my life. I went from a kid who had almost no social group, was very insular, alone and lonely all the time, to a kid who loved life, was very social, had lots of friends, had lots of after school activities that excited me, and all of it came from theater.
Wow.
Aw. Do you remember your first show or one of your first shows that really stood out?
Well, my first show was Peter Pan
Mm.
with what was the name of it? It was a children's drama theater in Fort Lauderdale. And I think I played the dad. I didn't even have a big part. I was just there at the very beginning with the dog, but it was amazing. My one scene, I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. And I did 3 shows with that. I think the biggest thing I did was the giant in Jack and the Beanstalk.
Oh,
So that
yeah.
was, for a 14-year-old boy, that was my big
Yeah.
my big star role. Um, And then when I went to the performing arts high school, it was one of the schools that did very well. Back then there was a thespian competition, which may
Mhm.
still exist. And we had a show called Rainmaker, and I
Mhm.
was in that as the sheriff. Again, it was a small part, but that show ended up winning the state thespian festival, and so we took it to Tallahassee and we performed in their huge Broadway house for all of the other high school kids. It was like the greatest experience.
Yeah.
Mm, I love that. I love those
Yeah.
early experiences.
Well, they're so formative. I mean, that's
They
what
are.
happens, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you just mentioned that there was a moment where you decided that this was what you wanted to do. Could you tell us more about when you decided, yeah, I want to do this professionally?
Well, I mean, that again, that became my thing.
Mm,
So theater became all I wanted to do. I mean, I was at a performing arts high school. I was taking
mhm.
out of my 7 classes during the day, I think 3 of them were performance classes, either dance or musical theater. And then I was tried to be in everything I could. So after school, I was in rehearsal. You know, I would leave, and that was a long way. The school was in downtown Fort Lauderdale, and we lived 2 hours out. So I would have to wake
Oh,
up at 5 a.m. and get the bus, I think, like at 5:30 to get at school by 7:30. And then rehearsals and stuff, I often wouldn't get out until like 7 or 8, so I wouldn't get home till 10 p.m.
mm,
And then during the weekend too, I was either in rehearsals or I was taking ballet classes somewhere. So it just sort of became very clear that this is what I wanted to do. And I got an agent and I was on some TV shows when I was in high school. And I mean, it happened pretty fast. And I did some music videos for MTV and all that stuff. I did the Joe Robbie halftime show. I danced with Patti LaBelle and Tony Bennett in the halftime show in
wow.
That's
1995.
great. Wow.
I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was a really fun 3 years, and I made sort of my closest friends there, and many of us were all still a tight group of people, and many of them stayed in the arts.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah.
Tell us about your journey after your high school years and some of the career highlights that you've had.
Well, I'll tell a little bit of college, and then I'll do a sort of greatest hits. I I went to a conservatory program because from my high school, everyone was trained to go to Juilliard or go to Carnegie Mellon or go to the DePaul Goodman School of Drama. That was where you were expected to go. And I went to a conservatory program at DePaul, and I was like, this is not really what I want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't enjoy that. So I actually transferred 3 times during college. And it wasn't until my 3rd transfer to a school called Center College in Danville, Kentucky, that I directed my first show. And it was like, oh, this is what I want to do. I enjoyed acting, but really I was just sort of directing myself. And once I realized I wanted to create communities and I wanted to unpack a play and find the secrets in it and research it and share that with actors and work with the designers to bring something that you imagined into reality. And so then I got to Greenville after undergrad because the Warehouse Theater had a journeyman program back then. This is in, what was this, 1999.
Mm,
And I asked, when I came in, I asked him if I could direct, the artistic director at that time. And he said, sure, you're mostly going to be an actor, but you can direct some shows. So I stayed here for 3 years and I started directing. And it's hard if you know you want to be a director when you're 21, 22 years old. There's just not a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
And if you're running the ship and any theater, whether it's a community theater or a big huge professional organization, they need their shows to do well.
That's right. That's right.
And one bad actor can't ruin a show, but a bad director can.
Mm,
So they're hesitant to give that to those who are inexperienced.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of very lucky breakthroughs. One is that I was asked to run the drama program at the Fine Arts Center High School.
mhm.
And this was back in 2000. I was 24 years old. And I really used it as a laboratory. And I just was like, well, let's see, what if I want to create this? And how can I work really physically? And how can I create physical theater? And I did this sort of very physical production of Alice Through the Looking Glass. And I did this sort of immersive production based on Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces.
Mm,
And so that was one thing that I started to sort of find out. And then the other thing is I got a bunch of friends together and we started a theater company in Georgetown, South Carolina. And I did the classics. I would do Greek plays and I would do Shakespeare and I would do like Ibsen and Strindberg plays and things like that. And we brought it here to Greenville. We toured it to the warehouse. We would tour it to Louisville, to Actors Theater Louisville. And we played at a place called the Strand Theater in Georgetown. So, and we played at the colleges. The Governor's School for the Arts in Kentucky brought us in. And through that, I did 4 shows every summer, and I would put them up basically in a week. I basically did 4 full productions in 4 weeks. So you're just working all the time. And by the time I had done that, I met the artistic director of Actors Theater of Louisville, and I'd already that time directed 12 plays and spent sort of a year in a lab at the Fine Arts Center. So by the time I met the artistic director of Actors Theater of Louisville, he was surprised with what I had done, and that was able to get into a grad school. That helped me get out of, where I had been, which is, smaller towns in the South. And I went to grad school at University of California, San Diego. And that really catapulted me. While I was there, the director of Jersey Boys hadn't been created yet. And that director asked me to assistant direct him on something. So I did. And then when Jersey Boys hit, he asked me to be the associate director. So right after grad school, I was the associate director of the Tony-winning Broadway show.
Wow.
And 3 years prior, I'd been teaching at the Fine Arts Center.
Wow. Yeah. I want to dive into this journey of a director for a moment here, because you don't hear about that as much as you hear about, say, acting, conservatory and actor training programs. What is your take on how to become a director and the way we have it structured right now, if there is a structure for it? I would debate that at times, but what do you think is the best path for that? Or what should we be doing to serve new directors and emerging directors?
Well, it's tough. I mean, this is one of the dirty secrets of directors, is this is why a lot of directors come from money, because it's very hard to begin. I did not. And if you're going to go this way, and the peers that I found, you really go through the apprentice program. So you end up being an assistant director on something, because ADs, especially when you get up to the higher levels, associate directors and assistant directors are well-paying gigs. And you're able to have the work, you're able to learn under someone. You're able to be in the room, meet great actors, meet producers, meet artistic directors, and you can really sort of climb your way up like that. The best way, of course, is just to work. But again, it's very hard to just create work. Like I'm very skeptical that directing can be taught in the classroom. It's so much of it is social relationships. Knowing
you're building trust too.
And you get a director is sometimes you're a therapist, sometimes you're a psychologist, sometimes you're a host of a party, so you're always dealing with the social dynamics in a room, whether it's how the actors interact with each other or how conversation happens with collaboration between multiple partners like designers or music directors or composers or lyricists or playwrights, or whether it's talking to artistic directors and producers and those who have the money to support the work, especially if you're a freelance director, and convincing them of your idea, being able to communicate to them why what you're doing is going to work. And then there's all the organizational stuff. When you get on a big show, it becomes more like leading a small army. It's, a lot of it is, can you make the trains run on time? There's all these sort of waypoints that you want to hit. You want to make sure that you have your show blocked by a certain time so that you can do a designer run, so the designers can see it to hang the lights, so that you're able to show, so there's all these in the modern American theater, there's all these sort of waypoints on the timeline of a rehearsal process that you've got to keep in the back of your mind and be aiming for.
How do you think, because what I worry about with young directors who become assistant directors is that a lot of times what I see is that they end up becoming secretaries or kind of makeshift stage managers or something like that, how do we balance teaching them the craft of directing with kind of all the admin that also has to be done with the show?
Yeah, I mean, so I think what I'm talking about when I say assistant associates, in my mind, I'm specifically imagining those huge, big Broadway companies that have multiple tours. So you already are at a pretty high level in that sense because you're given the keys to the car, which is a multi-million-dollar organization, and once a show has been a hit, the original director is doing another show and the assistants are mounting all the subsequent productions. So in that case, the assistant is running the room. I was directing the shows of Jersey Boys. I directed Jersey Boys. I'll run through this quickly, but I did it. I learned it on the first national tour, and then I got increasing responsibility for the second national tour, for Vegas, and for Canada. So that by the time it was overseas, I was basically directing it from first rehearsal until opening night. And that was in London, that was in Melbourne, Australia, that was in Singapore and in South Africa, and that was in New Zealand. And at that point, the director, Des McAnuff, trusted me, and he would come in, for the 2 days before we opened or something. So you're getting a lot of experience. I think if you're thinking about being an assistant on a smaller show, regional theater show that has 3 weeks of rehearsal, 3 weeks of a run, and that's it, the director as the assistant director isn't ever going to get real experience in the room. So something like that I think is less effective because you're right, all you're really doing is taking notes. But if you can get onto something that has a longer run, maybe it's an original show, something like what we're doing with the festival, that show will be done lots of different places, then an assistant can get a chance to direct it somewhere else because they were there on the original production. They were there when it began. They know the playwright. If you can get in close with the playwright, they can trust you and you can get them to recommend you for jobs in the future. That's a very important way to do it. So yeah, I think being the assistant associate it sort of has two different worlds. In the modern big Broadway theater movement, the resident director and the assistant associate director really are creative positions. But in the smaller regional theater movement, I think they often are, administrative positions.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do feel like as an industry, we need to do more to support directors. We are always looking for directors that we never seem to find them, but that we don't seem to do that much to cultivate the next generation. So
one thing that the STC, which is the Society of Stage Directors and Choreographers, the directors equivalent of Actors Equity, the union, they've been really promoting commissions for directors for major theaters. And I know that theaters have been doing that. In fact, Shelley has been talking to the Old Globe about that. So I know that they're sort of commissioning directors, not just playwrights, but commissioning a director to say, listen, we want you to come in and do your production of a classic, and we're going to commission you. We're not committing to producing it, but we're going to give you 3-4 weeks with actors, and we want you to basically workshop it. And it can be a Shakespeare play or a Greek play or an Arthur Miller, whatever you want, but commission them to see what's your idea. And that, that's a way to really understand that directors have a very important voice in the creation of the work, and you can see what they do and how their imagination helps drive the audience experience of the piece.
I love it. I'm glad they're doing that. That's a great program. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about your experience. Are there any particular inspirations or particular experiences? I mean, obviously Jersey Boy must have been huge for you, but anything that you look to that you can say really inspired the way you work today?
Yes, I think there's a couple. I mean, interestingly, there was a theater practitioner named Augusto Boal, and he did something called Theater of the Oppressed. And I became very interested in Boal when I was in college, and I even went to hear him speak in London, and I wrote a whole paper on him where I interviewed and spent some time with his translator, a guy named Adrian Jackson in London. And one of the things that Boal sort of suggested was that there was less of a division between actor and audience. So he called the audience spectators. And he would do shows where they could stop in the middle and the audience members could come up and take on a part and sort of change the nature of the play. And I loved this idea of just getting away from these actors move around and speak in the light, and these audience members sit quietly in the dark. I was never interested in that. And I wanted to break it up and make it more exciting. I wanted to make it feel more, the word now is a more immersive, but back then I knew I wanted to make it feel more like a sporting event. You feel like you're at a sporting event, that you don't know what's going to happen. It's not pre-written. Anything can happen, and the audience is going to affect how things go. My work back then, I imagined it to be very political. And I recently realized, I've moved into circus too. And I directed Big Apple Circus for several years, and I directed a Cirque du Soleil show, and I have a magic show in Vegas and all these variety shows. And I sort of realized, oh, that's Boal coming through. Like, when you're doing a clown act or a circus act or a magic act, it does feel much more. It feels like there's an equality with the audience, that the audience has an effect on what's happening, and it changes a little bit every night. There's a chance for a bit more chaos and a bit more immersion in it. And, to bring it back with something like Jersey Boys, Jersey Boys is funny how they allow little bits of this, in the sense that there are times in Jersey Boys where the audience becomes the audience of the Four Seasons in the 1960s. Right. And the story is that this song needs to be a hit. Well, it's only going to be a hit if the audience goes crazy for it. And the audience becomes the audience of the show. So there's a funny thing where it's like, now it's your turn to play the part and help us to the next level. But now pretty much on a lot of my work, it has this ability for audience interaction.
I love it. I think we need more of that, because I do think the days of the silent audience in the dark is, it has its place, but I think we are a more interactive society and people want to be engaged. So I love it.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about concerts and, rock concerts and getting the audience boisterous and all of that. And I do feel that theater has taken a lot of this on, where they want the audience to be responsive. They want them to be vocal. And it's funny, certainly an immersive theater movement. Yeah.
Bruce. It's funny. I'm kind of anti breaking the fourth wall. I think Melanie and I have talked about this sometimes, where when I go see a production, I want to observe the story. I don't want to be in it. You know what I mean? It's kind of, and so it's, but yet there's some folks that really love that whole, taking a step out and getting a reaction and being able to respond without any problems from the people on stage. And I'm just,
Bruce, in some ways I agree. In saying this, I agree with you. Like, one thing I love about directing circus is they know me, so the clowns will never ask me to be the audience volunteer. Right. I too hate being an audience volunteer.
Right.
No, like the worst thing is, and I've done so much, I know the tricks. Like if someone starts coming down the aisle, I'm like, look away, never look them in the eyes. Just ignore. But there are levels of this too. The shows right now, if you look at the shows that are really popular, whether it's Hamilton or whether it's Six or whether it's Moulin Rouge, all of those shows have a audience participatory event. You're not coming on stage as a volunteer, but you're expected to be kind of raucous. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's not a lot of decorum that's put on the audience in those shows.
Right.
So I would say like that, even that has a little bit of a foot inside what I'm talking about. But then you can go sort of all the other way to shows like Sleep No More or Then She Fell or Fuerza Bruta, these like really immersive shows. And I think there's a spectrum.
Yeah,
totally.
That's true. Well, tell us, Wes. Now, you talked about how it was kind of funny. I forgot for a moment. You mentioned Greenville. I came to Greenville 20 years ago and all that kind of thing. And I forgot about that for a second because we've had that conversation. So I kind of know in a way what led you here. You knew about Greenville, but what led you here recently?
so it was COVID. We were in New York. My wife and I moved to New York, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago or 17 years ago, 15 years before COVID. And we would have lived there. We wouldn't have left. COVID threw a real wrench in the works. And I think there's a couple of things that happened. We were in Las Vegas because I was opening a new show. This was a hip hop dance show where the dancers all wore costumes with LED lights and thousands of programs that you could do on it. So we were in tech for that show. Yeah, you see. I went from directing, Ibsen and Strindberg to hip hop dance shows. You can see the deterioration of the art immediately.
You have variety. You have a variety.
That's right. Yeah.
And the strip shut down during tech, and my wife and son were there. So we were already away from New York, and we were already in Vegas when New York shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided to get an RV and go to the Grand Canyon because we weren't going to go back to New York. We couldn't stay in Las Vegas, and we didn't know how long this would last. I could be asked back in a week. I was on a contract still.
Right.
So then when it became clear Vegas was gone and New York was completely closed down, we were already sort of out of it. So, and we didn't want to go back because COVID was, prevalent in the city. And this was the days of fearfulness.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up just driving that RV to my dad's, and my dad lives in Georgetown, South Carolina.
Right. Okay.
And during that trip, everything got canceled. In 2020, my wife, who's a director as well, and I had these great seasons lined up where each of us had like 5 huge shows at big theaters, big exciting pieces, some pieces that were bound for commercial life, some that were going to be these long running shows, some that sort of had Broadway ambitions. It was really exciting.
Wow.
And it all got canceled. We had the kind of seasons you feel like you worked 20 years to get.
Right.
And you're on the road and every call is like postponed indefinitely.
Oh, goodness.
So after that, we arrived at my dad's in Georgetown, South Carolina, and we didn't have any reason to go back to New York. We have a son. His school had gone remote. They had closed the building and all the teachers were
right.
home.
Sure.
And so we just stayed there. We stayed there for 2 months, the rest of April, all of May, and basically all of June. And by that time, it had become clear that New York was going to be shut down for a year. So this was a series of events. We find all this and we're like, gosh, what are we going to do? And my landlord is like, so your lease renews in July. Do you want to renew the lease? And I was like, Shelly, are we going to renew our lease in July? And this is like, mid-June. And she's like, well, what's the other option? I'm like, well, I guess the option is I fly up, get a couple movers, put everything in a van and, drive it to Myrtle Beach and store it.
Yeah.
And just because July 1st coincided with our lease going up, we knew we were going to be there a year. So we did that. So now we're in Georgetown. We have no home. All of our stuff's in storage in Myrtle Beach. And my dad's house it's a 3-bedroom house.
Right.
And we're in 1 bedroom, my son's in the other, and they're in their bedroom.
Yeah.
And it's like, we shouldn't live here for a year. I mean, as much as I love my parents, we should move somewhere else. And at that point, the world seemed open. It seemed like we could go anywhere.
Right.
But we kind of wanted to stay next to family in case work, what if they get the vaccine tomorrow and work comes back and we've got to leave? We're going to need a grandparent to watch the kid. And we got to get our son in school somewhere. He's a 12-year-old boy. He's, they frown on it if you raise them like Huckleberry Finn.
Right.
I said this to my friend. I was like, I'll just raise him like Huck Finn. He's like, Wes, you realize Huck Finn was stupid. I was like, oh.
Now, come on, he was just a country boy.
He was a country boy. He was the only one that knew to free Jim. So so we didn't know any schools in Charleston or Savannah or Georgetown or Columbia, all these things. And around this time, my stepmom says, well, what about Greenville? And Shelly says, well, what's Greenville? And I was like, oh, I lived there 20 years ago. And she's like, do you know people there? And I was like, yeah, I know a lot of people there. And she's like, is it a good town? I'm like, yeah, it's a great little town. And so we came up here to check it out. And I said, well, let's take a look. And she said, well, you didn't tell me Greenville was this beautiful.
I was gonna say, how long had you been? Had it been since you've been back?
Since 2001.
Oh my gosh, it's so much changed. Yeah.
And I was like, Shelly, it wasn't this beautiful. Like, I didn't tell you because no one told me.
Right.
We're like, well, let's try it. And I had a lot of friends that I'd kept in touch with, and they helped us find a school and helped us get a house. And we weren't planning on staying. We were planning on coming to Greenville, spending a year here, and going back to New York.
Right.
And while we were here, we just fell in love with the town.
Yeah.
We just were like, this place is amazing, and Dashiell's great in school, and we're really happy. And so we decided to stay.
Great. That's excellent. And so then, of course, that kind of spurned on this festival because this is your background. I mean, this is what you've done a lot of in your life, in your career.
Right. Exactly. I had run the New York Musical Festival before COVID. That was the largest musical theater festival in the world. We did 30 musicals over 3 weeks, all over Times Square, all within like 5 blocks of Times Square, sometimes up to 10 venues. And we had a bunch of Broadway shows come out of there and off-Broadway shows, and even shows that didn't go, the writers would go. And the writers would come out and go famous, and actors came out of there. So it really was the gateway to Broadway.
Wow.
And I loved it. I loved developing work with writers. I loved amplifying voices. I loved bringing audiences to see them. And I really loved the readings. We would do a mixture of full productions, cabarets, and readings. And the readings and the cabarets were so much fun because the play is still in development. And when a play is being created, and when I say on this musicals, you need to see how an audience is going to respond.
Right.
And that's on everything from, will this joke land? Is the story keeping tension throughout? Are we putting in buttons on the songs and letting the audience applaud where we need to? How do we build that up? Sometimes you don't want to let them applaud for a couple of songs. So you sort of build up, a big sort of standing ovation. 2, are these characters relatable? Are they being followed? Where is the energy dipping? And you can't learn that if you're just writing it on the screen.
Right.
It doesn't matter how many times you do it. So the audience is an important collaborator in the process of creating a musical or a play. And readings are when they get invited in as a collaborator, because that's when the writer listens to them and goes back and changes the show based on the audience's response, based on their collaboration.
Right.
Well, that doesn't happen once a show's open. When a show's open, it's set. Once the reviews have come in, it's set. So there's something really fun about a reading. And my wife had done new plays, and she did the world premiere of Doll's House Part 2, and she'd been at all of these festivals and directed new works and had relationships with tons of writers. And we had seen that during COVID, a lot of the curated festivals had disappeared. So when I say curated, what I mean is that festivals that aren't submission-based,
right?
A submission-based festival, you get hundreds of plays and you have a bunch of people read them, and then you choose a few of them that you're going to present either as readings or as productions. But the thing about a submission festival is the only people who submit are early career playwrights. It's people trying to get their first play produced, and there needs to be an entryway for new writers. But established writers also need development. Established writers also need to make their plays better. I don't care if you're Lin-Manuel Miranda. His next musical can't just go straight to Broadway.
Right.
You got to have that experience where an audience collaborates with you and says, this is what it should be, not this. This part we're responding to, this part we're not. And those type of developmental opportunities for established writers, a lot of them went away. Sundance, the film festival used to have a theater festival. That's gone now. This is all during COVID and post-COVID. The Humana Festival of New American Plays at Actors Theater Louisville, which was the premier new play theater event in the world. People came from Paris and Switzerland and Germany and China and London to watch that festival, to review the plays back in the papers in these other countries. That's closed. The Lark, which was this new development home, is gone. And there's several others which I think are also on sort of shaky legs now. So we knew that there were writers out there who were great writers that were looking for places to develop their pieces.
Right.
And we knew that the Southeast didn't have one of these. There's no sort of nationally recognized theatrical destination event in the Southeast where people come in to see a bunch of new works, to see what the future of American theater is going to look like. So we knew about all that and that had wanted to do something like that. Now, it just so happens that Greenville is the perfect city to create something like this. Aside from Greenville being a great cultural town, aside from Greenville being this amazing destination town, aside from Greenville having all of this international support and people moving here during COVID because they want this way of life, apart from all of that, Greenville has several venues up and down Main Street within walking distance of one another. And the festival model that I like is when you make a citywide event like the New York Musical Festival was. So we started talking to the Warehouse Theater and the Peace Center and Greenville Theater and South Carolina Children's Theater and Center Stage. And all of them said, yeah, we love this idea. You can do something at one of our spaces. And so then we knew, oh, great, we can create this event that all of the theaters in Greenville are a part of. And we can bring in audiences and have them walking from the Peace Center to the Children's Theater and from Greenville Theater to Center Stage. And everywhere you turn, there's something happening, a reading or a class or a cabaret or a panel. And that was really exciting. And then we reached out to playwrights, and I think we got some of the best new works in America right now.
That's incredible.
Amazing. And who are some of the playwrights that are coming?
Kate Hamill. Kate Hamill, we just did a panel with her at M. Judson on Monday, and she was one of the 10 most produced playwrights 2017 through 2020. Her works have had hundreds of productions, and some of them right here in town. She was voted Playwright of the Year by the Wall Street Journal in 2017. And we got her newest play, which is an adaptation of The Scarlet Letter. It's really exciting. She boils it down to 6 characters, and they're all have sort of contemporary language, so it feels very modern. I mean, especially now, because what is The Scarlet Letter about, right? It is about a pregnancy. It is about what role religion plays in a society and in the laws of a society. And it is about a woman and a society telling her she doesn't have control over her own body, right? That is what The Scarlet Letter is about. So it feels very modern.
Yeah. Pretty timely, huh?
It feels very timely. There's a lot of the questions that Nathaniel Hawthorne was dealing with in the 1700s that we are back again questioning today. Then the next play we're doing is Dodie and Diana by Kareem Fahmy. That's a super exciting play about a couple, an Egyptian American woman and a white Canadian man, and they're having problems in their marriage, and they go to Paris to try to work out these issues. Well, they happen to end up in the hotel that Dodi Al-Fayed and Princess Diana were in before they crash. And they happen to be in that hotel on the 25th anniversary of that crash.
Oh, wow.
And the 25th anniversary of that crash happens that month when we're doing the festival.
Oh, that's wild. It's hard to believe that's 25 years. Man.
It's eerie. And in this show, even though she's Egyptian and he's white, and she's famous and he's a finance guy, so the ghosts of the past start to sort of come out, and at times it feels like, oh, is this an argument that they're having or an argument that Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed may have had? So it's a really interesting play, and Kareem is breaking out. He has plays all over. And anyway, that one I'm super excited about.
Yeah.
And then we're doing on Saturday night, we're doing a musical adaptation from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. That is by Adam Ben David, Kristen Budzina, and Jessica Penzias. And Adam, he is the musical director and the conductor of Book of Mormon on Broadway right now. We met when he was the MD of Jersey Boys. He also has done Aida and Bronx Tale, I think, and Hairspray. He's been all over. He's got tons of Broadway credits. Jessica Penzias, she's amazing. She's had her shows performed in several different countries, and she was one of the people who helped develop and produce Hamilton. And with that show, I'm bringing in... So that show, there's three people at the center of it. Miss Basil E. Frankweiler, who's an older woman, a young girl named Claudia Kincaid, and her younger brother, Jamie Kincaid. And for the people I'm bringing in to play Miss Basil E. Frankweiler, Liz Larson, who is a Broadway vet. She was a Tony nominee for Most Happy Fella. She was in Hairspray. She was in Beautiful. She was in Rocky Horror. I mean, she was in Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway. She's just got a ton of credits. Yeah. And then for the kids, for Claudia Kincaid, I'm bringing in Anna Ray Haller, who was young Elsa in Frozen on Broadway.
Nice.
And I'm bringing in a little boy named Samuel Lee Weintraub, who... he's a little prodigy, and he was in Miss Saigon as Tam on Broadway. And then the ensemble is all local actors. I've got people who were stars of Color Purple at Center Stage, people who have been stars at Greenville Theater of Mamma Mia and of Elf, and just people from around town. So that's a really another exciting way to bring local actors and connect them with Broadway.
That's awesome.
And then the final reading we're doing is of a new children's show. So you can see we're doing plays, we're doing musicals. From the beginning, I said, well, I want this. I love musicals. My wife loves new plays. I was like, let's make sure both of those are represented. And we both have this commitment to children's theater for young audiences.
Right.
One of the things I'm proudest of is a show called Airplay that I created with these clowns from the circus I did. And Airplay is this young audience show that it's been seen on 5 continents. It's been running for 6 years, maybe even 7 years. And it's been seen by almost 200,000 people. It's just a beautiful show. And it sort of questions what theater for young audiences is. So we wanted to make sure we were doing that as well, because that's a world, again, where it's very hard for new playwrights to come through. Right. In that world, people can complain, oh, I don't want to see a musical based on a movie, right? It's Pretty Woman, it's Moulin Rouge, it's Tootsie. I want to see an original musical. And you can question that. Sure, it's tough for an original musical to break through, but it's even harder for an original piece for young audiences to break through.
Yeah.
Right? Because that is going to be Charlotte's Web or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or James and the Giant Peach, or, it's always going to be something based on a book. And so there's an organization that I had known through Airplay called TYA USA. TYA is Theater for Young Audiences USA. And it's a member organization. It's got like 1,500 members, and most of them are children's theaters. And they had a sort of competition and a project during COVID called Reimagine, to reimagine what theater for young audiences looks like and reimagine who's writing them. And they had hundreds of people submit to this contest. And one of the 8 winners is this woman named Samantha Miller. And she wrote a piece called Dragon Soul Offline. And we got that piece. So we're doing the first live public presentation of Dragon Soul Offline at South Carolina Children's Theater on Sunday. Oh. And it's about a boy who's a middle school boy. And at middle school, he's sort of shy. It's difficult for him to make friends. It's hard for him to come out of his shell. And then he goes home and he puts on his headphones and he puts on his headset and he plays online video games.
Mm.
And in these video games, he's got a group of a party, that he's never seen, and they look at him, and he's the leader, and he commands them through these obstacles where they fight dragons and they best giants, and he's got 60,000 Twitch followers, and he's this epic king. And then he goes to middle school and he's bullied and has no friends.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, how does he find balance in his life?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like the perfect show because it's about kids today. It's for kids today. Sure. It's very relatable. I joke, like, you can do, I don't know. I mean, you can do like Charlotte's Web as much as you want. And I love Charlotte's Web, but my 12-year-old son doesn't leave Charlotte's Web being like, Mommy, that's my life on stage.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like Bruce, you said, I want to go to a show where I see the story.
Yeah.
Well, ideally, you want to go to a show where you feel like you are the protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're different from you, even if they're a different race or a different gender or a different sexuality, you are experiencing the world, their experience, as if it's happening to you. You are empathizing with them. Mm-hmm. And I think Dragon Soul Online is just the perfect vessel for kids to find an accessible point inside those characters. Mm-hmm. So those are the 4 readings we're doing. And then we're ending with a cabaret with Jared Spector and Kelly Barrett. Jared, he was a Tony nominee. He originated the role of Barry Mann in Beautiful, the Carole King musical.
Yeah.
He originated the role of Sonny Bono in the Cher Show. Mm-hmm. He played Frankie Valli on Broadway for 1,500 performances, which is where I know him from.
Wow. Yeah.
And Kelly Barrett, his wife, originated the role of Sherry in Rock of Ages. She originated the lead in Zhivago. She originated getting the band back together, and she was on the Punisher TV show. She was on Younger and all these things. So we're doing this cabaret where we're going to talk about their experiences developing these projects, Beautiful and Rock of Ages and Jersey Boys and the Cher Show. And then they're going to sing songs from the shows and tell the story about like when they first heard it, where it was placed in the show originally, what rewrites went through. So it's going to be like a mix of like inside the actor's studio and like superstar Broadway concert.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
I'm going to be there. I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be one.
It's amazing. And that's the only show that you can get tickets to. Mm-hmm. The readings are first come, first serve, and they're free tickets. But the cabaret, the tickets are $75 and they're on sale now.
Excellent. Now, let's just refresh what the dates are again for the festival. And when you said there's first come, first serve tickets, does that mean you still have to get a ticket in advance, or do you just show up for these productions?
Exactly. So the festival is August 12th through the 14th. Mm-hmm. And the model, we wanted to make sure that it was a public festival. We wanted to make sure that anyone could be there and that anyone could see it. Mm-hmm. So we made tickets free, but you can't just make tickets free and let people reserve ahead of time because they won't come.
Right.
If they're free tickets, I'll reserve 100 2 months before I have to go.
Yeah.
So to stop that, what we've done is that we are going to have some tickets available for first come, first serve. There are some put away specifically for people that come to the door. Now, there may be a line, but there's going to be some away. And then about a week before the festival begins, I am going to allow reserve tickets to be made online, free reserve tickets to be made online. About a week before the festival starts. Okay. So you can, if you wait a little bit, you can go online then and get a ticket. And if you forget about it and you just show up to any of these readings, August 12th through the 14th, there will be free tickets available at the door.
Great. All right. Super.
And what's the story with the cabaret tickets? How does that work?
Well, the cabaret is sort of a different thing. I mean, the plays are readings, so it's actors at music stands of these brand new pieces that have never been heard. The cabaret is the songs you love from Jersey Boys and Rock of Ages, and Kelly was Nessa Rose in Wicked on Broadway. So these are like the biggest Broadway hits, and Kelly and Jared do this cabaret sort of all over. Now they don't do the question and answer part with me though, but this cabaret is a thing that fills 2,000, 2,500 seat theaters. They're doing it at just 150-seat theater at Genevieve's.
Right.
That's all. It's so intimate. Everyone is within like 25, 30 feet of these two people. And those tickets are $75, and you can get them right now at Peace Center. I know there are a few left.
Excellent.
Awesome.
And that's at the Peace Center's website. They're offering that.
It's on the Peace Center website, and it's happening August 14th. It's our closing event, Sunday at 7:30.
And for those who don't know, Genevieve's is the restaurant cabaret that's within the Peace Center complex.
Correct.
That's right. It's directly behind their main stage. It's got beautiful windows overlooking the river, and they'll be singing as the sun sets behind them. It's going to be a glorious event.
Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. And where can people find out more information?
You can go to our website, which is at www.southcarolinanewplayfestival.org. That's the best way, but we'd love it if you followed us on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram. And on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, it's SC New Play Festival.
Excellent. Well, this has been great. And it sounds super exciting. I'm really excited for Greenville for hosting this. I think it's a wonderful event that we can see in our own city, but also because I, personally love new works and really get excited about seeing something that is not a movie that turns into a musical. So I am really excited about seeing some original work as well. So this is great.
And I think, Bruce, there's such a variety of pieces that we'd love it if you saw them all. But if you don't, like, if you're like, oh, I get it, like Scarlet Letter is for me. Or if you like want to see Dodie and Diana, you like something edgier. And that show is, that's our edgier new play. Or if you're like, no, I want a nice family musical in the vein of Annie or Matilda. Well, that's Mixed Up Files. Or if you're like, no, I really want a theater for young audience that I can take my 12-year-old kid to, that is Dragon Soul Offline.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful that you've picked pieces that actually represent the theaters too that they're being produced at, because each one of the theaters here have kind of their own little niche of things that they like to offer, and they have built-in audience, and of course everybody's welcome, but they have audience members that appreciate the particular style that they present. So I think that's kind of neat that you have fashioned the festival that way with the theaters in mind, in a way.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I feel a great debt and appreciation to all of these theaters for hosting us there, and feel a responsibility to make sure that the work we put on their stage, which we want them to advertise to their audiences, and of course it's free, so we want their audiences all to show up. And you want to make sure that if you're at one of these theaters, you're not doing a piece which is just not at all what their audience expects to see on that stage.
Sure.
Right.
I think in all of them, we're pushing different kind of boundaries, but they're all within the playgrounds of what these theaters do. And I think, quite frankly, any of these theaters could produce one of these pieces. I would love if these pieces end up back at the theaters eventually.
Yeah.
That'd be fantastic. What a legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Wes, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an amazing conversation, and I'm so excited to have you in the upstate and to experience this play festival. This is going to be fantastic.
I am so excited that both of you had me on here, that you let me be in the green room with Thespis. Again, this is one of the reasons why we fell in love with Greenville and decided to stay. Is it's people like you, it's the theater community here, it's the support for artists, it's the excitement for new work. It's a really special place.
Yeah, it is. Well,
It is
great.
indeed.
This is super, and we'll look forward to catching up with you. You're going to be at every production, right?
I'm going to be everywhere. I'm at every production. We're also doing classes that you can take. We're doing a panel at Center Stage with our dramaturg, where really, if you are an aspiring playwright, we'll tell you about other festivals, submission festivals. We'll talk about what makes a good play. And I'm going to be at all of them.
Excellent. Very
Wonderful. Well, we will
All
see you
right.
there.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys there. I'll see you at the South Carolina New Play Festival.
All right. We'll see you later. Nice to talk with you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, like I said, that was a great conversation full of energy and so much information, and so exciting for Greenville. I mean, in talking about some of the festivals that he has done, previously in New York and so on. It's so neat to have a little glimpse of that come to Greenville, and who knows how this will just grow from here, you know?
Right, right. I
Yeah,
think this could be the beginning of something really good.
yeah,
Super
I'm really
exciting.
excited about it. Yeah, really excited about it. And I got to clear my calendar so I can see all of them because I
I
really
know.
want to see all of the shows.
I do too. I do. They all sound amazing and totally different. Like there's such a nice variety of
Mhm.
programming. So
Yeah. And so
super.
nice, of course, to incorporate, our theaters in downtown Greenville,
Hmm.
all of them coming together and participating in this festival. I just think it's super. And so this festival, which we've talked about, this inaugural South Carolina New Play Festival, runs August 12th through the 14th. I'm sure Wes mentioned that, but it's 12th through the 14th, 2022 in downtown Greenville. We said at all the area theaters, and it's going to feature 3 readings of new plays and 1 reading of a new musical. And they've got classes and some panel discussions and a wonderful cabaret that's going to be held at Genevieve's in the Peace Center. So really a full weekend of activities,
Hmm.
just, yeah, really looking forward to it. So to get all the real details though, and like the names of the shows and what theater they're playing at and the times and all that stuff, you can go to the website, South Carolina newplayfestival.org, and get all the minutia so that
That's
you can
it.
get to the
That's
shows.
it.
Yeah,
And of course, they're on social media too. So you can follow the South Carolina New Play
absolutely. Yep.
Festival on all the major social media channels, which
Facebook
Wes
and
mentioned.
Twitter and so
So
on. Yep.
check it out.
Excellent. Looking forward to it, Melanie.
Me too.
Well, until the next one, we'll talk
All
to you
right.
later.
Okay, Bruce. Talk to you
See
soon.
ya.
Okay,
Bye.
bye. Thespis in the Green Room is a Courageous Crossings production.